Hello and welcome to Series 8, Episode 4 of In Suspense, a podcast and podcast for fans and writers of crime fiction. I'm Lauren North, and with me today is the lovely Nikki Smith. Hi, Nikki.
Hello, Lauren. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good.
It's exciting to be back. In our last episode, Leslie and I chatted to Fiona, Cummins and Tim Weaver on the subject of a series versus a standalone and all that sort of stuff. And it was really interesting. And it gave me a bit of food for thought as well, actually. I almost messaged you actually the other day being like, I'm going to write a series. And then I was like, oh, no, I don't want to. But it was really interesting. So yeah, lots of comments. We got lots of comments, didn't we, Nikki?
Yeah, I mean, it was absolutely fascinating, actually, and I thought it was really interesting to hear about how Tim struggled a bit with his last book. I mean, it's all fine now, but it was just that process that he went through, because considering how much of an experienced writer he is, it was kind of comforting to hear that, I think, to just know that, well, it doesn't matter if you turned out 14, whatever it is, bestsellers, that you can still go through that process. And also quite horrifying, because you kind of think, well, once you're kind of, on to number 6, you should know what you're doing a bit. But that was really good to hear that, no matter what their level of experience, that, people still struggle with writing. And I love Fiona's books. So it was great to hear her kind of chat a bit about Into the Dark and why she decided to write a series and things. So yeah, really fascinating.
I was having a massive cold sweat though that both of them are complete pantsters and they write a series. I was like, what? You must plan. You must be planners. So it's amazing. Like, you just wouldn't know from reading their books that they haven't got a clue who the murderer is or what's happening until the end. So I mean, amazing. Kudos to them.
I wonder whether it's something to do with whether they feel that their books are very character driven. I mean, although they are incredibly plotty and they end up with an incredible plot, maybe that just kind of comes out of the characters and they write the characters and don't focus so much on the plot, whereas I think I'm probably the other way around. I need to nail the plot and find out what's happening and then kind of go back and do the characters.
Yes, that's me as well. Yeah, exactly. I don't even know my characters' names in the first draft. But on to today's episode, we are talking to Mira Shah about her debut novel Her, which is out in ebook in March and paperback in November. And we're going to be discussing whether someone should dump their day job when they get a book deal, which we've got a lot to talk about, I think, as well, haven't we? So we're going to talk about that in a minute. But before we start chatting about the topic, what's been going on with you, Nikki? How are you and what are you doing?
Well, I've been waiting for my edits to come back for my book that's coming out in 2024, which is set in the Maldives, and I got those back on Friday. So yes, I've spent the weekend kind of sitting in a cold sweat wondering how I'm going to work my way through those, but just have to trust in the process and that it will come together. And I've also been trying to think up another idea for my next book, which has been really, really, really difficult, actually. I've got an idea, but I'm just trying to make something work. So I've been kind of fiddling around and going backwards and forwards and thinking it over. And I think it's just a case of I need to let things sit whilst I do these edits. And then hopefully, I think your brain works on it subconsciously when you're not thinking about it. And then I'll come back to it kind of fresh after I've done these joyful round of edits. Yes.
Oh, yes, that sounds good.
Yes. How about you, Lauren? What have you been doing?
Well, I also have my edits back, and so does Leslie. So we're like the little editing team at the moment, aren't we? It's quite funny on the WhatsApp
We'll be in crisis,
group.
Lauren.
We are all in crisis.
Yes. You could have seen me about 2 minutes ago with like my hair all tied up with a butterfly clip and no makeup, and just that's how I'm going to be for the next 2 months, basically.
Yes.
On here when I'll slap a bit of makeup on and brush my hair. So
that's all. That's the only time I ever wear makeup. The lady in the farm shop today said, "Oh my goodness, your hair looks so lovely," and I was like, "Yeah, I just blow dried it because I've got a thing later. Like I don't normally ever bother. It's just a reminder that you look so rubbish all the time when someone says stuff like that, isn't it?" But I had my edits back as well. In fact, I've had 2 sets of edits back. So I've got my edits back for my second Bookature book, which is out in July, and my second Elsie North book, which is out in 2024. And so I've had a bit of a panic that they both come in. I knew they were coming at the same time. It's all going to be fine. I have got time to do them. and I'm just cracking on basically. So yes, I worked yesterday, 9 hours on a Sunday. I mean, that's the joy, isn't it? But yes, I'm doing fine. And actually the Bookatry ones are really, there's not too much to go on. So I'm looking forward. I'm just going to get through them. I've got copy edits landing this week as well. I'm going to get through them, and then I'm going to throw myself into LC North in March. This is exciting. So yeah,
it is exciting. It's really exciting. Yes, I can't believe how many weeks to go now till publication.
Oh, it's like 4 weeks, just under 4 weeks now. So yeah, I'm sort of forgetting that's happening as well a bit, and I need to keep the focus on that too. So yeah, I've just every day now I've got like an interview or a podcast with something about something. I've got my diary every day. I'm like, right, who am I speaking to today? So yeah, it's busy, but yeah, I've got quite a few events and things as well. So it's all going well, I think. So yes, but back on to our chat for today. So what do you think about the topic, Nikki? So it's a bit like, for me, I was a full-time mum when I started taking myself a lot more serious as an author. So I think it's really difficult for me to comment necessarily on whether you could give up your day job, because you can't actually give up looking after your children, even though there have been times when I've wanted to. But what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I worked full time when I was writing, so I did the whole, ridiculously early mornings and things to get the book done. And when I got my debut book deal, I was working in finance. I worked for lots of different companies, but at the time I was working for a trampoline park, actually. And
did you get a discount?
As you do, yeah, not on the trampolines. I was doing the finance side of things. Yeah, I was desperate to give up. I didn't like my job particularly. It was incredibly long hours, and I was desperate to give up, one because I wanted to become an author, but also because I wanted my hours to be more flexible so that I could look after my kids, who were much younger then. But I think that, as we'll probably talk a bit more about to Mira, I think people need to think very, very carefully about whether they can afford to give up their day job if they do that. I stopped doing what I was doing. I went down to kind of part-time hours for a while, and then I went freelance because I had some people that wanted me to do stuff, which I still do. I do freelance stuff, and I've also picked up some freelance editing work as well. And I think for most people, you're going to need to do something. Yes. So yeah.
Yes, I agree. I can't comment about giving up a job, but I certainly can say that you don't know what's going to come around the corner with it. Like, it's such a fluctuating industry when it comes to like what kind of money you're going to get for like one advance versus the next advance. And I think when I first started out, I was like, oh, so this is the money I'm going to get every year. And it just really wasn't the case at all. I'm the same as you, actually. I do some freelance editing as well. So yeah, I think it does make a difference to keep the stress away as well, to be able to not worry too much about the finance, because creativity and stress aren't two things that go hand in hand, as we both know. So yeah, it's a really difficult one to sort of know when to give up the job.
But neither of our debuts are in the current financial climate. So it will be really good to welcome our guest today to see what she thinks. So welcome to In Suspense, Mira Shah. So welcome, Mira Shah, to In Suspense. Lovely to have you with us.
Oh, lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
No problem. I'm going to read your bio first, Mira, so our listeners get to know a little bit about you. So Mira Shah is a writer, former city lawyer turned legal editor, and the proud owner of 3 lovely dogs. She is the daughter of Indian African parents and lives in North London with her husband and the pack, merely a few miles away from where she grew up, although she often dreams about retiring to Italy should her intermittent lottery entries ever prove successful. Yeah, I'm with you there, Mira. She wrote her first ever novel in 2020 during the pandemic after studying on the Curtis Brown Creative Novel Writing course. And Her is being published by Hodder and Stoughton in March in ebook and November in paperback. And I think there's a copy of it behind me, but it's got a different cover now. So Mira, could you tell our listeners a bit about your debut novel, Her?
Yeah, sure. I've heard that this question never gets easier. Although it's the first time I've had to answer it, so I'm going to do my best and fingers crossed. So, is a domestic psychological drama set in the suburbs of North London, and it's about two neighbours, Rani and Natalie, who form an unexpected friendship. And whilst there are loads of sort of themes simmering under the surface, sort of like race and grief and prejudice, and like toxic relationships, it's ultimately a story about female friendship and the complexities of female friendship. And I guess it's like the reality versus perception. So it asks the questions, who are we really, and like who are our friends really. So it's kind of like digs a little deeper, like, do we really know ourselves, and do we really know the people around us? So yeah, basically
that was fantastic. Well, that was a great explanation. It's very dark, her, and it's sometimes a bit of an uncomfortable read, and because it does blur the lines of friendship, family, love, and obsession. You chose to write about one character, Natalie, who is a lawyer, like you, and another character, Rani, who is a British Indian, so also like yourself. So someone said that authors' debut novels are often subconsciously autobiographical. Would you agree with this? So how much of yourself do you think you've put into those two characters?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really, really good question. So I would actually wholeheartedly agree, with like one small amendment, and like mine is definitely consciously semi-autobiographical rather than subconsciously. Because when I was writing her in 2020, I never actually wrote for the intention of being a published author. Like, for me, it was like, lockdown has arrived, I've got more time on my hands, let me kind of throw myself into something, as a way of, I guess, escapism from like a world that was in turmoil, and also just as a way of therapy. So I had loads of like feelings and like emotions sort of bubbling around inside me for years and years, just based on life experience and things that happened to me, and I'd never really like processed them. And then I found myself with that chance and that time to like really be able to like get under like the nitty gritty of like what I was feeling. And that's when I wrote her. And you're completely right, Lauren. Like I find that I'm part of both. Like I can see myself in both Natalie and Rani. They like reflect me and who I am in like two, like in very different ways. So yeah, it was a way for me to like write and process like I guess my past experience through these characters. So yeah, I feel like with Rani, obviously she's British Indian, and as am I. And whilst like, there's a lot of diversity in publishing, like I kind of felt like the books I was reading, they didn't really reflect like me as a person. So there was a lot of stuff about like racial struggles, but it was like predominantly like a book about race or a book about a different culture. And like obviously me, I've been born in London, I've grown up in London, and like I find myself like a bit of British, a bit of Indian, like kind of belonging to two very different cultures, but never really belonging in either. So I think through Rani, I wanted to write like a character that was like relatable to like everybody. Like she's not just her race, like she's not just like, you know, British Indian. So it's kind of more nuanced in her. So like what it's like being a British Indian, but also what it's like being a young woman growing up, what it's like sort of like, you know, feeling like lost and alone. So it was all kind of all the stuff that she was battling. So I think that was like a massive part of me. And then with Natalie as well. So initially I wanted to write about grief because I've kind of been through it at a young age, and kind of wanted to write about like what it was like to like the challenges of grieving like a monumental loss, but also navigating a world that hadn't stopped, that was still turning. And so like this mask that you kind of wear to the world as a means of self-preservation, as a means of like survival. And I think Natalie for me represents that. So she's definitely a character that on the surface everything is looking great and everything is going well for her, but inside she's like carrying this massive amount of loneliness. And imposter syndrome and just like fraud almost. Like she feels like a complete fake. And I think that for me, like whilst our life experiences are very different, like she definitely started off like resembling that part of myself. So
yeah, that's such a good answer. And I do think that there's so much you can identify with in both characters. And for me, Rani especially, it felt like she'd lost some of her identity in motherhood as well. And I think that's something I think a lot of people can identify with as well. So I completely agree with what you said.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, I think also because I wrote it during lockdown, so it was like the claustrophobia of being locked down, having your like world shrunk, right? And then having to like, I kind of found myself thinking about neighbours I'd never even thought about before, and like I'd never even like crossed my mind. So like the guy that used to walk his dog at like 5 a.m, I'd be like, oh, I wonder what he's up to, and I was like, why am I thinking about that? But that kind of made sense. So for me, it was like that kind of having that loneliness and that isolation and that claustrophobia, and like both Rani and Natalie feel that bit in different ways. Like as you said, like Lauren, Rani feels it because she's like lost in herself, and she feels like everyone's moved on without her, and like so she feels isolated, whereas Natalie's like kind of isolated within herself. So so it was kind of like the lockdown thing as well. So that's where like the domestic neighborhoodness kind of came from.
Well, I loved the book, Mira. I thought you captured those feelings of envy as well that we have sometimes when we look at somebody else's life from the outside, and we think that everything's perfect without really understanding what's going on in it. So did you channel some of those feelings that we all have when we're aiming to get a book deal in order to write that?
I thought that was a really really funny question, actually. It's a weird one because I never sort of set out to like get kind of a book deal. It was kind of like, for me, it was like in stages. So I only kind of started writing in 2020, and Her was the first book I've ever written or even attempted. So it was kind of like that world of that industry was so removed from my life that it was definitely, I can definitely see now, being in the industry, how that sort of feeling of comparing yourself to like everybody, and just feeling like whilst you're like proud of their success as sort of a collaborative community, it just sort of sometimes makes you feel like you're not doing enough, or like that kind of thing. So I can totally see where that feeling can come from. But I think for me it's like so both Rani and Natalie are in their like 20s, and I just remember, I'm not in my 20s anymore, I'm in my 30s, but I do remember in my 20s feeling like that, because whilst you're trying to grow into like an adult essentially, and you see people that you used to maybe go to school with and be on the same path with, and suddenly everyone's going off in all these different directions and achieving all these different things, and you sort of wonder sometimes, like, maybe if you'd taken that path, could you be in there, and like if you'd taken that path. So it's like you feel like you're at crossroads almost, and like one step that you take puts you on a completely different path. So I think with like Rani, whilst I've never experienced the level of like lost ambition that she sort of was going through, like an element of that I did feel. So kind of I went into, as you mentioned, I went into career in law, and I've since left that career, and it wasn't the right career for me. But often when I used to be in that job, and the stress and the demands of it, I used to think, gosh, I look at my friends who are actually enjoying their lives and enjoying their careers, and think, I wish I could have done that. But I didn't even know how to get there. It just felt like a completely different world. So definitely, I did feel like that. And so for me, I think it was like, whilst I was envious, but it was more connected to like my own personal circumstances. Like I lost my mum when I was 19, and I kind of felt like that really impacted my life, and I just felt like I wonder what it'd be like if that hadn't happened to me, and where would my life have taken me then. So I think it was a lot of that feeling of envy, and feeling like perhaps you're on your own, sort of thing. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about the industry. But I mean, we're not alone, are we? As you say, there is loads of no matter who we are or what industry we're in, we're always comparing ourselves. Like before I was in an author, I was comparing myself to other mothers and other women and other couples. And it just, you can't help it, can you? I think it's part of human nature, and it's
Definitely
finding a way to deal with that. That's not always easy. But Her builds to a series of shocking conclusions. I won't give anything away, but I did want to ask you, there was some issues, some things that were raised that needed a bit of sensitivity, and I just wondered how you went about sort of addressing those and handling them with the care that was needed and that you achieved. Does that make sense as a question? So I'm about to be a bit vague because I don't want to give anything away.
No, I think I know what scene you're referring to. So, and people that have potentially read it will probably have an idea as well. So, but yeah, that scene, I don't plot, so I didn't foresee it coming. It wasn't something that, I'm a pantser through and through. So it was definitely the characters that led me to the scene, and I was sort of umming and ahhing, and I thought it just, for me, just felt like the climax of what had been sort of bubbling within this particular relationship throughout the novel until that scene. And it's weird because, like, whilst I've had to rewrite quite a lot of my book, this particular scene stayed pretty much as written up until copy edits, and then my editor and I kind of read it, and we thought, one, we were worried that, so a lot of people that may have been through this or something similar to this, we were worried about the triggering aspect of things, and two, because it's so sensitive and this particular thing is so personal to the person feeling it, we wanted to make sure that it was given the sort of the justice and the emphasis and the and the sensitivity that it deserved. So what we decided to do was less is more in this particular scene. So it was written with a lot more detail initially, and sort of I was worried that I would be placing emphasis on things that people might not be seeing or might be triggered by or might think that's not representative of the situation. So we took out a lot of the detail, and we kept it much more succinct. And I think in hindsight that was the best decision for something like this. Because I was really, really worried about it, and I feel like, especially with books in our genre, things like this can crop up, and I myself in the past have been triggered by certain scenes, that I've read, so I was aware that could happen. So that was sort of the way that we dealt with it, and any sort of emotions that might have been in that scene, we tried to deal with at a later date throughout the book. So any sort of feelings that this character had, we tried to sort of deal at a later date rather than the scene itself. So if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yes, it's a good answer. So we're talking today about whether you should dump your day job once you get a book deal. I think, I read, this is probably kind of old now, but you did a law conversion after doing a history degree, and I think when I read that you work 4 days a week as a commercial litigator in the city, but you've given that up now, have you? You've changed.
So I have.
Well, I was just going to say, it's obviously, we've all been there. It's thrilling when you get your kind of debut book deal. And so did you ever consider giving up your day job when you got that call to say that you had a publishing deal?
No. The honest answer is no. I mean, whilst the amount that I received in terms of advance was nice tidy amount, and I feel very sort of grateful to achieve that, to receive it, but it wasn't definitely a life-changing amount, and I think for me it was important to sort of take it one step at a time, because I know with this career it's not like a normal job. It's not you don't have the security that a normal job can offer. So whilst there was a part of me that was like, yes, I'm a writer, let's go for it and throw everything. And there was the sort of risk averse aspect of me that was like, you know what, this is great. You're one step on the way, but let's take it a step at a time.
Very sensible. Very sensible.
I mean, my husband would disagree with me that I'm definitely not. He's definitely the most sensible out of the two of us. But I mean, I was quite frivolous in that I bought myself a very luxurious sofa, which I never would have been able to afford otherwise. So that was like, sitting in our living room, and I'm just, every time I look at it, I think, I
got that.
Yeah, exactly. I earned that sofa. So yeah, like definitely, not ready to give up the day job. I think also because we live in London living prices and how it's sort of a different kind of vibe. So I think I'm definitely, I think what instead of sort of that approach, I think what I'm seeing it as more sort of like trying to achieve more balance. So I currently work so full-time hours, but within 4 days. So it's like sort of compressed. So actually my Monday to Thursday is like quite long hours. I do have Friday off, but I feel like by Friday I'm like exhausted from like
I was just thinking that it must be hard then to switch your brain to writing on a Friday.
Yeah, so I think it's like right now, like the last 2 years, I've managed to just like pull myself through it. And I've written my second book. I wrote that last year. So I was kind of like, I got to a stage where, I've done it, but I'm very, very close to burnout. So I think, I really want to make sure, like going forward, that I have some sort of a balance. And I don't know what shape that's going to look like. I don't know, but that is my aim, rather than sort of thinking, getting to the full-time writer sort of aspect, which right now is not within reach. I want to sort of create more of a balance between my day job and my writing. So
I think finding balance is a bit tricky sometimes, and it can come in different places with different people, because I started this year exactly the same, saying I need to find a bit more balance, and for me that has just meant cutting out socializing quite a bit, because I find socializing really draining, because I'm such an introvert, that actually for me I've just saying no a lot more, and that's how I'm finding balance. But it doesn't work for everyone, does it? Everyone's got to find what the balance means to them, I think, haven't they?
Yes, exactly. I think you're completely right, because you forget, don't you, when you're a certain type of personality, you want to do it all and you want to achieve everything, and like you think it is possible, but actually we are only human, and well-being and mental health is just so important. So
yes, they are, absolutely, especially for creativity as well. I think it's not just a case of mental health and well-being to get up and go and do any job. It's to be creative, which is in itself so hard. And also if you're stressed and worried about money as well, because I said that in the introduction, that it's all very well wanting to throw away your job and throw yourself into writing, but if you're suddenly really worried about money, you're not going to be able to write anything. So it's really hard. But I think many people outside of publishing don't realize that when you get a book deal, you are usually only signed for like 1 or 2 books at a time, and so if they aren't successful, it can really dent your chances then of continuing with that publisher or finding another one. And I spoke in the introduction about how precarious the career path is, because you don't really know what your next advance is going to ever look like until you're right there. But do you think there is a time when you see yourself giving up your day job? What will it look like for you to be able to do that?
Yeah, no, I think it's that's a really, really good question, and I've often sort of reflected on at what point that might be, and like how I might be able to make that work. And I think I've come to the conclusion that actually I don't know if a full-time writing career is right for me. For various reasons, like, and I'll go into them. Like the first one is that my personality is like driven by pressure. So I feel like whilst it is exhausting getting up at 5 a.m. writing for a couple of hours and then actually starting the rest of your day, whilst that is exhausting, I feel I can probably get as much done in those 2 hours.
I would get more done in those first 2 hours than I do for the rest of the day.
Well, I completely agree with you. And so it's like that. So I think in that sense, right, if I could just sort of get through that, I think what would I be doing? I mean, whilst there is a lot that you could be doing that's not writing in that career, and I feel like is that maybe the driving force for me would be to sort of find a way where I can do more, maybe like part-time work. So I've got sort of like, I don't know, a couple of days with the day job, a couple of days with the writing, and in that sense it kind of works well. But yeah, the other thing, as you touched on, Lauren, was like the financial side of things as well, is that I've been self-employed before, and I found it really difficult not knowing what I was going to have coming into my account. So I think in some ways, having like a day job where you know that is your set amount of money, and no one's going to take that away from you, and it's a constant in your life, I think that will enable me to be able to throw a lot more into writing and see that you know, and sort of have that healthier outlook with it. That
I think people tend to look at authors like you know, Stephen King or James Patterson or, you know, J.K. Rowling, whoever, and think that every author is in that position. When I think the ALCS this year was saying that the average author income is at 7,000, I think it is, a year, and it's been falling for about the past 5 years as well. It's gradually kind of going down and down. So I think now for most authors, they need another income alongside writing. And, you know, certainly when you're starting off, as you said, Lauren, because it's just so precarious, you don't know where you're going to be in a year's time. It's
I think that's it. And everyone, I'd also find like everyone's sort of like what they need to like live and to do the things that they want in life is so different as well, isn't it? Like, you know, depending on where you live, depending on what your hobbies are, depending whether you have children, all that kind of stuff. Like, so you know what your sort of base is in terms of what you need to earn, and then I tend to see it as like work backwards, like this is what I need to earn, how much of that can I get from writing, how much of that do I need to get from a day job, and then kind of think about it that way, opposed to, I mean, I know some people that did have the golden ticket for their debut and their life was very different, and that's brilliant. But for me, it was definitely, you know, it's a lovely sum of money, but it's definitely not enough for me to quit my day job yet. But we shall see.
Just talking about that golden ticket that you mentioned, that I think it's really important to say though that that's only for those that book deal. True. And again, like, you just don't know what's around the corner, and the higher that advance is, the more pressure there is on authors and the book itself to succeed. And if it doesn't, and especially in the market we're in now, where the charts are being dominated by Colleen Hoover and Richard Osman, you know, those massive authors, it's very hard to make a splash, isn't it? And so if you don't achieve what the publisher wants you to with that book, that it's just what do you then do? It's not like it's going to be the same advance next time around. So the golden ticket, even then, I think is a cautionary tale as well.
Oh no, that's exactly great. I completely agree with you. My agent was like really helpful in sort of helping me realize that, because even before we went on submission, she was just sort of saying to me, like, you know, strategically how she wanted my career to go. And like, she was very much like, I mean, you've heard this phrase bandied around a lot, but it's like a marathon, not a sprint. And like, I know for me, I really held on to that, and I've held on to that for the past 2 years, because I would much rather feel comfortable being a grower. And I don't know how long that will take me, and I don't know if it will happen, but I would much rather get better with every book, because I mean, don't people say that your debut should be your worst book? It should be the worst book you've ever written.
Yeah, although you have more time to write it than the other books, so I don't know, there's a bit of balance, and the's so much input, isn't there?
Technically, I think but that's the struggle as well, and maybe we can talk about that later. But for me, you know, I only wrote it in 3 months, and like edited it in a month, like, and so I feel like you're right, like a lot of people will sit on it for maybe years upon end and like perfect it, and that's brilliant, because you really can do that. But then that isn't the reality of the career as a published author, and perhaps that might be why I was able to knock out a second book so quickly, is because I kind of was in that mindset where I just needed to sort of get them out and work to those tight deadlines.
That's really good, because most people aren't in that situation. Most people take 2 or 3 years to write that first debut, and then this publisher's like, second book, 6 months, okay. And now you're like 6 months,
and also do all the publicity for the first one, and spend time writing the second one as well. So
exactly. It's never just one book, is it? It's always 3 books at a time.
Exactly.
So you mentioned getting up at 5 a.m. Can you talk us through what a typical day looks like for you, juggling both your writing life and your day job?
Yeah, I very much can. So yeah, it's very much as you say, Lauren. So I get up at 5, and that the reason why I sort of pick 5, it's not sort of a random number. It's because I need at least an hour and a half in the morning before the rest of the household wakes up. And usually my husband will sort of set the alarm at 6:30, and one of my dogs will get up at 6:30. So I know that is my time where there's no disruptions. It's just me against the world almost feeling. So that is, and that usually works better for me with first drafts. Like I feel like my creative brain clicks into gear in the early mornings. I think it's through the circadian rhythm or whatnot. I'm not a scientist, but I guess it's something to do with that. So yeah, and then that's when I usually get probably a chapter or so done. My chapters are quite short, but I usually tend to knock out between 1,500 and 2,000 words in that space of time. And then it's straight on to the dog walk. So one of us will take the dogs for a walk, one of us will do morning exercise of some sort. So yeah, it's my life is I don't know if you have this, but my life is in sort of half an hour increments. And it's just like if I was to plot it on an Excel spreadsheet, it would be just quite weird. But yeah, so that's like, the dog walk for an hour or exercising for an hour, whichever one it is. And then I tend to start work about between 8 and 8:30, work being my day job. So then I log on and I'm sort of firing through that until about 6:30. So it's quite a long day. And then by 6:30, it's time to make some dinner. And I'm the cook in the household. My husband is a reluctant chef, so that is my job. And so yeah, I'll usually knock something out, something quick and easy within half an hour. And then if I've got a deadline, for example, so if the structural edits are in, or if there's any work that I need, writing work I need to do outside it, I'll usually sort of start that around 8:30 and sort of keep going until about 10. But if I've got nothing, if I'm still at first draft stage, I might have a quick look at that chapter. I know you both might need to cover your ears, but I actually have to edit as I go along, I'm afraid. So
oh, Mira, you're a pantster and an editor as you go. I just can't cope.
I know. I just can't help it.
I'm only joking. I do absolutely love hearing the different processes, and I just think it's so fascinating that we all come at it slightly differently.
Exactly. I think it's the lawyer in me. Like I'm just so used to just like interrogating like sentences and words that I know it's not the most efficient way to perhaps the most efficient way to write, but I guess it's the only way I know how at the moment.
Yeah. Gosh. I'm similar, but I go to bed at 9. So
Lauren is tucked up in bed by 9.
Literally cannot stay awake past 9 o'clock.
I love. But do you mean you actually fall asleep at 9, or do you sort of do some reading?
No, it is literally 9 o'clock. Like I'm in bed reading at 8 and I go to sleep at 9 o'clock. My kids are like, oh, mum's gone to bed already.
So you go to bed before your kids?
Yeah, now, because they're that much older.
Oh my.
So I'm just like, that's it. Like, but then I get up the next day and I'm the one that's up and I'm awake. Exactly. And it just goes downhill.
Yeah. Are you're a morning person, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Are you both morning people?
Yeah. I'm definitely. I can edit in the evenings maybe, but like creatively, it's usually absolute no. Every now and then I'll have a weird maybe, I can suddenly get a bit of a wave at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, and then I might write for an hour, but it not really. I'm definitely much more of a morning person.
Yeah, I'm the same.
What time do you get up, Nikki, and start writing?
It totally depends. Like at the moment, because I've got edits and stuff, I'll be up at like 5, half 5 kind of thing. But if I'm kind of just doing a first draft, then no, it would probably be a bit later, and I wouldn't get up till, I don't know, half 6 or whatever. So
that's still quite early, isn't it? Though.
Yeah,
I know a lot of people that wake up at 9, roll out of bed, switch on their laptop, and
Yes,
just like
they are
actually makes me feel a bit like shivery inside.
That's the author life that everyone thinks they're going to have.
Exactly.
You see that they're going to be in their PJs and you kind of get up, have a cup of coffee, and maybe start work about 11. But no, that's not really realistic. So.
Although I did actually read an article, I can't remember who the author was, but she basically works best at between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m.
Oh,
So she'll set her
wow.
alarm at 3 a.m., work from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m., sleep up until 11 a.m., get up and then work for a couple of hours then, and then she's done for the rest of the day.
Wow, that's so interesting. I wonder how she found that out, that 3 a.m. is the critical time for her.
I was wondering, you're right, how she tested that theory.
So I read somewhere, I think, that you find it difficult to maintain a healthy balance in terms of work and relaxing. And I know I felt like that as a debut. I just constantly felt I should be doing book stuff. So do you think it helps to be very driven when you're trying to maintain two careers? And what do you do to relax?
Relax, what's that?
Yeah, I know.
Is there a definition?
Is that your dog walking in the morning? That's a bit of relaxing.
Yeah, I think that's it. It has to be like a purpose-driven relaxing. So I have to achieve something. No, it's so I'm a Capricorn. I'm not a massive sort of star sign person, but I am pretty much a Capricorn to a T. So I don't know where it comes from. Even if no one's asked for anything, there's something inside me that has to sort of churn something out ahead of a deadline or just way earlier than I expect it. And it drives my agent mad because she's like, why are you sending this back to me? I don't have time to look at it. So I think you're right. Like, being driven for me is both a gift and a curse, I would say. And it's all, as you say, Nikki, part of finding balance and trying to switch off that part of me to a certain degree. So it's great because it gets things done. Like, it's that goal orientated part of being in that way. Like, you see something and you have to sort of tunnel vision your way through it no matter what. But at the same time, it's to the detriment of yourself. So, I find myself just, as not having really much of a social life, spent early mornings, late at night, taking annual leave from work, to get things done. And I am ahead of myself. Like, I wrote my second book last year. Most people who are debuting this year are still writing their second book. So it's like, there's no one telling me I need to do it, but it's that inner drive inside me that I'm constantly chasing myself. So I think it's definitely, as I said, a gift and a curse. And it's not great in terms of, because at some point you're going to burn out, and at some point I did burn out. So it's definitely sort of taking it one step at a time. But I think part of the reason is just because this career is so much out of an author's control. And that's one of the things I've learned, is that all we can do is write the best book that we can write, but there's no guarantee of success. There's no guarantee of anything after that. And if you are a control freak, and not even if you are a control freak, we all invest so much of ourselves and our time into a book. So we obviously want it to flourish. So because of that, we feel like we need to do everything we can to promote it. But actually, there has to be a limit for yourself. You have to have a cutoff point. So that is the thing that I'm realizing, that I don't have to work every weekend. I don't have to work every early morning. So
do you see this? I'm bells are ringing in my head. I'm exactly the same. Do you find that you beat yourself up a bit? Like, if you sleep in till 6:30, like, oh my god, I've just wasted the day already. Do you like, and even though you might not actually have anything you have to do, that still goes through my head, and I feel like I've failed at 6:30.
And that's it for the whole day then. I failed the whole day as a failure.
Oh gosh, what chance have we got here, guys?
Honestly, I think this is why people like us are drawn to this career as well, because it's like we have the ability to finish books. Like, most people would dream about being a writer, but they can't finish their first book. And it's that part of ourselves actually can keep going and churning out book after book. But you're right. It's like you just end up having a word with yourself and just saying, it's like the world is not going to end if I don't get up at 5 a.m. one day. I totally agree with you, Lauren. It helps actually, having a reality check with non-writer people sometimes, and just seeing how friends are, or how your partners are with stuff, and just getting a sanity check.
Is there anything that you've been able to take from your day job that's been useful, or what's the most useful thing that you've been able to take from your day job that's helped you with your publishing career?
That's a good question. So I would say, I mean, two kind of very big things is the first thing, when I was practicing law, you had to get into the habit of especially when you were sort of junior or training, that anything you write is going to be sort of shat on, and like I mean just completely interrogated, like the style of your writing, the content, the sentence structure, everything would be redlined and so you kind of have come to this point where you just lose the preciousness about your own words, and that really helped me, because I know that some writers can find it really hard being edited and find it really hard being critiqued, but for me, I kind of really appreciate, and I'm really grateful for edits, and as much as it's really like tiring and overwhelming when you receive your edits, I think working with someone, having someone being able to interrogate from a different perspective or a different angle is incredible. So that's one of the key things. I'm not precious. Like if someone tells me to scrap 10,000 words, okay, it's annoying, but I'm also like, okay, fine, that's fine. If it's going to make the book better, who cares?
Yeah,
like I'm fine with that. So that really helped me, and I had to sort of rewrite a lot of my novel, if I'm honest, because it was the first book I've ever written. It's the book that taught me how to write, not just writing it, but having it edited, taught me what good writing is, taught me how to sort of write compelling, gripping sort of plot. So whilst the story didn't change, like the way I wrote it changed. And sort of second thing would be resilience. So when I was applying for training positions, it was like rejection after rejection, and it's like
sounds familiar.
Yes, exactly. It's like, I can't believe 10 years later I'm having to do it again. But no, it's but that's what it was like. It was like and they were actually way less personal than some of the writing rejections you get that can actually, say encouraging things. They're very much boilerplate rejection letters. So that in itself builds resilience and builds thick skin, and that definitely helped me in sort of writing. And I guess like the final thing I should mention as well, like I worked as a litigator, so essentially the premise is someone comes to you with a problem, and you have to make a story out of that problem, so make a case for them. So whilst I did learn to write from reading, I do feel actually like having that litigator type mindset when you're essentially creating a story out of facts really did help me with writing, because that's what I was doing. I was essentially building a story out of certain facts that I had, and creating something out of it. So yeah, I would say very much so. I think that's probably why a lot of lawyers end up becoming writers, maybe.
That's so interesting. And that's a really good answer. I like those things, especially the rejection. Can we just talk about how you got into writing a bit, because it's fascinating to me that you only started writing in 2020. We meet so many authors on this show, and you just in general, who have had like 10 books of rejections. They've got drawers of books behind them that they just haven't been able to do anything with, and then they've sort of learnt the craft. I suppose my question is, one, before 2020, did it ever cross your mind to write books and novels? And two, so talk us through the process in 2020. You just signed up for the Curtis Brown course and went from there. How did that all come about?
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned sort of it never hand on heart never occurred to me to be published or even write a book. My first and foremost love it will always be reading. Like before writing, and it comes reading, and I feel like one of the things, I guess you probably feel this as well, but one of the things that writing's taken away from me has probably been reading as a reader.
A joy of reading,
and that's the frustration. But because I fell in love with stories, and I fell in love with other people's stories and other people's world building, and that's so I thought, why do I need to add to that, because there's an abundance of books out there. So it didn't even occur to me that I had what it takes, or I even should even bother, because there's just so many incredible books, and that was sufficient for me. It was very satisfying to be able to read. so yeah, the way I came to writing wasn't to sort of set out writing a book. I guess I touched on it before, was when I was sort of processing the loss of my mum. Like, I kind of did all the things that people do, like go to therapy and, you know, kind of exercise or whatever. But the thing that really actually helped me was like writing down my feelings. And you know, they were never in any sort of book. They were never supposed to be a book. I never intended them. It was just sort of almost like people journal, I guess, or just throwing words onto a page and just you know, letting go of what was going on. So that's how I came to actually writing. And I think it was a few years before 2020, so 2018, 2017, I kind of started an Instagram account, and it was called like Grief Pal or whatever. And I started just like posting random bits about grief and young adult loss and stuff. And it kind of really gained a lot of traction really quickly. And the reason for that was because I could sort of articulate what other people were saying but didn't have the words for. And it kind of showed me that, oh, I actually can write. I have sort of the voice that connects with people and builds community. So but even at that point, I didn't think, oh, I'm going to turn it into a novel, or like, I didn't think that just because I could write, it would necessarily mean I could write a novel. So yeah, and so that's basically how I came to writing. It was definitely just a means, a sort of cathartic means, opposed to anything else. But then when 2020 came, I applied for this Curtis Brown course because I had sort of set myself a goal of trying to write a novel and seeing where I got to. And because I am quite goal orientated, I did take it seriously in terms of, if I'm going to put energies into writing a novel, I'm going to, you know, try and actually write this novel and mainly for myself. But I kind of set myself that task. And so I didn't know how to write. I didn't know sort of the components of a story. I didn't know what good writing was. So the only way I thought about doing it was Googling courses, and that's exactly what happened, Lauren. So I kind of applied for it. I think it was January, and then by April we'd got sort of the acceptance come through via email and all of that. So that's how. And I think actually, whilst that Curtis Brown course was I mean, it was expensive, and courses are expensive, and there's a lot in the industry about that. Like, it's, you know, it's a privileged position to be able to go on a course. For me, it was expensive. They allowed me to pay monthly so I could manage everything, and so that was great. But I think what it taught me more than anything was accountability. Because if you've got someone that's like, you know, asking for work and you're submitting homework, that is what you need to sort of keep going. And so you don't need that from a course. You know, you can have a writing buddy, you can, you know, be on Twitter, you can have that accountability elsewhere. And that's how it helped me, and also confidence building. It made me feel like a writer for the first time, being surrounded by sort of talented writers. So I basically started writing around March, so just before the course started in April. And then it took me about 3 months to write the novel, or maybe three and a half months, and then I put it sort of away for a bit. And then I also gave it to my sister, who's like very, very blunt. So I could, so I knew that she wouldn't sort of sugarcoat any feedback. She would tell me honestly if like this was anything like of substance. And also, like, I sent it to my best friend as well, because she was quite similar personality wise. So I did that, and then I came back to it maybe sort of August time, and had like a month of editing. And in that time, my best friend and my sister gave me some feedback, and they were like, this isn't rubbish, you know, like
just what you want to hear.
Yeah, it really is, isn't it? I was like, can you be more specific? Like, I was like, and so then obviously I like edited using kind of their feedback. And then as I'm quite goal orientated, and I'm not like a perfectionist, and I'm not precious, I thought, oh, what's the next stage? Like, maybe I need to get a professional to see this, to actually assess whether it's good, because obviously my best friend and my sister aren't professionals. So then I thought, oh, let me just submit to like a few agents. And then as part of that course, Curtis Brown course anyway, they sent it to some of their agents in-house. So I got some like interest from one of the agents at Curtis Brown. And so that kind of gave me a little bit of a confidence boost. And then I sent it to like like a handful of agents in September, and then I was like really shocked to have like so I sent it to like 5, and then the Caterman agent. Really shocked to have 4 manuscript
Wow.
requests. Yeah, and then 3 offers. So I was just like, this is a lot. So it was kind of one of those things where it was like everything was aligned basically, like and I still had no idea really that was normal or wasn't normal. I just didn't really know. And then I sort of signed with Camilla Bolton at Darley Anderson in sort of October time, and then we spent like a few months editing, and then I went on sub, and 6 long weeks later.
That's not that long.
That's not that long. Yeah.
That's it. That's another thing I found, because by the 1 month mark, I was like, my career is over. It's never going to happen for me. But then you're right. Then actually, when you realize it's really not that long at all. And then by 6 weeks, an offer came in, and it was from Hodder. And so, we accepted it.
And you've given us so much honesty as well. We really appreciate that, Mira. And I just wondered what advice you would give to someone who's also sort of a debut, who's perhaps like 6 months behind you, for instance. Is there anything that you've learned so far that you wish you'd known a bit earlier on?
Yeah, no, definitely. So I think advice, I would say, like the big source of support for me has been other authors. Like it's definitely like power of authors, because the reason, like, I remember one review that I got, and it was like, this book has been everywhere, so of course I had to read it. It was on NetGalley, and like I don't have like a big advance or anything. There was no reason for it to be everywhere, but genuinely they felt it was everywhere because authors have been so supportive, because authors have been talking about it, and that's when I realized like how important it is to like forge those relationships, and to sort of give back as well to other authors. So I think that's the thing about this industry, that it is really hard, and there are so many ups and downs, but what is constant, I found, is that when you have relationships with other authors, people are genuinely supportive about about the community, that they genuinely want other authors to succeed, which I, having come from a legal career, isn't really the case. So
yes, I came from a background in investment banking, and it was it was very same as law, I guess. It's incredibly competitive, and it's not very supportive at all, and it's lovely that I think with authors that everybody is very supportive of each other. It's really nice.
Exactly that, and it's like, it's so collaborative in that sense, because obviously being a writer can be really isolating. So, and I think we do sort of, I guess we understand each other more than anyone, because we know this, like the intricacies of this career. So I think that's the first thing I would say. I guess we touched on this before, but it's the sort of aspect of like letting go of things that you can't control, and finding a way, because that's the biggest lesson I learned. And this past year has been really eye-opening for me as to how the industry works, and the things that I can control, the things that are just completely out of my control, and even completely out of publishers' control. Like no one, there's an element of risk that we all take. So and I think that's what's important, is that you need to stay within the things that you do best, and focus on what you can do best yourself. So whether that's obviously writing the best book you can write, whether that's being present on social media, whether that's not saying kind of no to like events that come by, if you want to, if you feel that you're comfortable with that, so taking advantage of those kinds of opportunities. But then also bearing in mind that what you want to achieve may not happen, what your expectations are may not be met, and that's not your fault. That's not the fault of you as a writer. It's not because you're not talented. It's not because you haven't written a great book. There's so many other external things that can come in the way. So I think it's about that, just knowing that it's different to other careers, where if you work hard you can get X, Y, Z. So if you acknowledge that, I think it's a change of shift of mindset maybe, which I'm still learning.
I think we all are still learning that. Like, I mean, Nikki and I talk a lot about what we should and shouldn't be doing on social media, and we both go through little stages, don't we? Nick, of being like, I'm on TikTok all the time, on it, and then I hate TikTok, I'm going to quit. And
is there any point on being on here?
I know, exactly. And it's that sense of what we feel like we should be doing, and actually what makes a difference, and what we want to be doing. And at the end of the day, we got into this to write books, and that's what we want to do. So I'm currently I'm not on social media for anything other than just to chat to my friends sort of element again.
And I feel like you've got to do what works for you and what's going to keep you kind of going with this career. Because actually my editor gave me that, she wrote me a really lovely supportive email at the end of it. She was like, she's like, obviously we want you to make money because this is the business, but you have to remember at the end of the day, like, you fell in love with writing, like, and so sort of like channel that and always remember that. And as long as
that's
that
good advice.
Changes.
That's really good advice. Hold on to that, definitely. So finally, we'd love to ask you what you're currently reading or currently read. Is there anything that you'd particularly like to recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, definitely. So whilst sort of I write in the suspensey book clubby genre, I don't really know what genre I write in, if I'm honest with you guys. I really don't. Like,
nobody knows. Don't tell anyone.
I write whatever my publisher tells me to write, whatever genre that is. That's the wrong. But anyway, whilst I do write in that, I do read quite widely. So there's 2 books that I've literally just finished reading. So one of them I've got here is proof. It's proof, but it's actually it's out, and so you can purchase it. And it's called the Circus Train. So I am by Amita Parikh. She's a Canadian author. I think it's actually a bestseller in Canada actually. But yeah, so it's what I loved about this book is I don't read a lot of historical fiction, but it's basically just written in such an immersive way that kind of transports you within the story itself, and it's set against the backdrop of World War II, so it's quite a fascinating story, but it's centered around this young woman that works within a circus, and it's sort of a coming in age type love story, but elements to it.
I love listening to historical fiction, so I'm going to definitely get that on Audible.
Get it on Audible.
I'm going to. Thank you.
I surprised myself because initially I was like, oh, this is not really my cup of tea, but actually I just could not put it down. So definitely one to watch. One to watch or purchase. The other one is a proof that is, I think it's out in April, but you both would have heard of it. Death of a Bookseller.
Oh yes, everyone's talking about that at the moment.
I've seen it. The lurid cover is very eye-catching.
Very eye-catching, and it's one where, like, I thought it was so different to what it actually was, and I ended up loving it way more. So I thought it was much more plot driven, but actually the characters, oh my goodness. So the characterization in it was amazing. It's a really, they call it the horrible little book, and you'll kind of understand why, because it's very dark and very quite icky and just quite disturbing. But I think the way that she was able to sort of get right inside those characters' minds, amazing. And I like female-centered books as well, and this is so I would recommend. What about you guys? Have you read anything of interest?
What have you read recently, Lauren?
So I have read The Assistant by Amanda Reynolds, which is coming out in April, May.
Oh, I think is it April? I don't know. Actually, I've read it as well. So
that's coming out in April, and it was brilliant. I started off really feeling like I didn't think I liked the main character, but by the end, it was such a subtle shift with how I was drawn into the story. And by the end of it, I absolutely was rooting for her, and the talent it was required to make you go from like disliking someone to liking someone without even realizing was amazing. So that was by Amanda Reynolds, and it's out in April, and it was really immersive and very fresh take on sort of social media and influencers and those in the shadows. So well worth
that one.
Yes, and then I've just bought The Hive by Scarlett.
I've read that.
Brade. I haven't read it, but I listened to her on a podcast with Nadine Matheson called The Conversation, which is I really like that podcast at the moment. So I just bought that based on that recommendation. So yeah, I'm looking forward to reading that.
Yeah.
Exciting. What about you?
Exciting. I was lucky enough to get a proof of Fiona Cummins's new book, which is the second one in her series. So she had Into the Dark out, and this one's called All of Us Are Broken. Comes out in July, and oh my goodness, read it and weep. It is absolutely fantastic. It's got Saul Anguish, her detective in, and Clover Blue, who's this forensic linguist, and it's about a family, the Hardwick family, whose trip away to a remote Scottish loch turns into tragedy when they encounter a damaged and incredibly violent young couple called Missy and Fox. And I think it's the best one of hers that I've read yet. It's very, very dark. It's absolutely incredible, and it made me cry loads. I thought it was brilliant.
Amazing. And so that's out in July, isn't it?
In July. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. So yes, and I think Amanda Reynolds is I think 5th of April. I think hers is out. So yeah. Yes. So so I think that's probably all we've got time for today, Mira. It's been so lovely chatting to you. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about dumping your day job and
or not,
or not. Yes, which we think is very, very sensible, actually. So Mira's latest book, Her, it's out in March in ebook and November in paperback, and we would thoroughly recommend it. So thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks very much, guys.
Yes, really it was a fantastic debut. Congratulations. So it's been lovely to have you on, Mira. And in our next episode, Nikki and Leslie are chatting to Louise Beach, aka Louise Swanson, on the power of storytelling, which is going to be fantastic. And I'm a massive fan of Louise. So if I get a chance in between my edits, I might try and join, but I might also leave you to it. And now do get in touch on our social media channels if you have any topics you'd like to cover. And if you'd enjoyed today's episode, then please rate and review on whatever platform you're listening on, so others can find us. We do listen and read and take on board your comments. I had an amazing comment last week from a lovely listener who asked where she can find out what books we always recommend at the end, so you just have to go back and try and listen again. And I said, well, what I'll do is I'll now list them in the description. So at the end of the description, I will add all the books we talk about. So that's a nice idea. So thank you very much. But that's it for now. So it's goodbye from Mira. Goodbye, Mira.
Goodbye. Thank you.
And it's goodbye from Nikki.
Mira.
Goodbye, Nikki.
Bye-bye.
And it's goodbye from me. So goodbye, everyone. Take care. Bye.